welcome you out to our Sunday school this morning. If we can find our seats, we're going to sing this song of worship. We're going to raise our hands. Let's sing this song, Well Done. Let's sing it out. I will wait on you, Lord, till you come. I can almost hear the trumpet sound. In the twinkling of an eye, I'll be gone. I can't wait to hear the words, well done. Let's sing it out again. I will wait. I will wait on you, Lord, till you come. I can almost hear the trumpet sound. In the twinkling of an eye, I'll be gone. I can't wait to hear the words, well done, well done, faithful servant, well done, enter well done, this is heaven. I can't wait to hear the words, well done. Well, I will wait on you, Lord, till you come. I can almost hear the trumpet sound. In a twinkling of an eye, I'll be gone. I can't wait to hear the words, well done, faithful servant, well done, enter in, well done, this is heaven. I can't wait to hear the words, well done. Give him praise this morning.
Amen. Brother Albert, here in the front, if you can open us up. Amen. Well, thank you all for making it out again this morning. I want to start by giving out some scriptures. If you're willing to read, if you could please raise your hand. And if we call out the scripture, if you could just raise your hand for the runners to be able to come to you so you could read that scripture. Okay, first scripture is going to be Genesis 41, 49, and then I'll need 53 and 54. So who wants to read that one? Gonzalo's going to do Genesis 49 and then verse 53 and 54 also. Deuteronomy 15:6. Richard. Proverbs 22:7. Okay, you can get that one. Proverbs 6:4 through 5. Sandra. John 6:12 through 14. Brian. And then 1 Kings 3 through 3:13. 1 Kings 3:13. Go ahead, Felix. And then Proverbs 11:24. Sylvia. Okay. Alrighty. So we're in part 5 of our Sunday school, the blessing. This is a roadmap for your financial journey. And the idea of today's Sunday school is that we would apply biblical principles that would lead to financial increase. And I just want to say, if there's any changes that you have begun to apply to your finances or that you are trying to adjust in the area of your money, you should be proud of yourself. They say one of the most difficult things is to change the way that we manage money. And so what I will say, though, is if you do, it's well worth it. I remember having to make those changes and adjustments and being able to see the benefit of that years later down the road. And so I want to read to you, I want to start off by reading for you a couple of testimonies from the book, The Total Money Makeover. It says, my name is Darian, I'm 40 years old. My wife's name is Kristen, I'm 39 years old. Before the Total Money Makeover, this is applying the 7 baby steps, these principles. Before the Total Money Makeover, we avoided discussing money and faced mounting car and credit card payments. After applying the Total Money Makeover, we were able to pay off $58,000 in debt in 10 months. We grew our emergency fund to $18,000, and in the process, we were able to raise 3 money-savvy kids. So they completely turned their financial situation around. Here's another one. My name's Autumn, 29 years old. Before applying the Total Money Makeover, single mother living off of $400 a month. And you say, how is that possible? She says, I had $100,000 of credit card debt. That's how it was possible. After applying the Total Money Makeover, no car payment, paid down debt, and now she owns her own company. So what this tells us is the application of these principles can improve our financial situation and unlock financial growth. One of the online questions that I got was, you mentioned telling your son to live off of 30% of his income. Can you explain? Well, my son, he's not 18 yet, but he has a job. So what I try to teach my son are the basic financial principles or financial growth principles. And what I tell him is, right now you don't have any real responsibilities. So you should be saving as much money as you can. And what I try to teach him is that the basics of stewardship or the basics of financial growth principles are in managing, giving, and investing. And so last week we talked about the steps to financial growth. I want to recap on that because I got a lot of questions after the Sunday school. People coming up to me and saying, hey, I wanted to comment, I have a question. And believe me, I do not mind answering anybody's questions or talking. But I want to encourage you, if you have questions, let's try to answer them or let's try to comment in our Sunday school because it's going to help other people listening online or watching online and people here with us. So this is what we talked about last week. Tracking the ins and outs of our money. And this is tracking our financial activity. The ins are our income, the outs are our expenses. And the idea is that we track this over the last 3 months so we can have a better idea of what's going on in the area of our money. This helps us to see where we can adjust, what we have to work with, our average cost of our bills. And then we talked about tracking our pluses and our minuses. This is understanding our assets and our liabilities of our financial situation. The things that go up in value or hold their value are assets. The things that go down in value, depreciate, are liabilities. So here we have our assets that affect us positively, and then we have our liabilities that affect us negatively. Again, the benefit of doing this is having the right perspective over our finances. Then we talked about a budget. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit. Budgeting is a plan for our money, and it does 3 things. It gives us control of our money, it guides us in our spending, and we're able to give every dollar a job. After talking about our budget, we talked about incorporating life insurance. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, talks about the importance of always providing for our family. Life insurance is a way that we provide for our family in case we're not around anymore. And so the life insurance tips we talked about is that the most beneficial life insurance is a term policy for 20 or 30 years because it's most cost effective. It's the goal of the life insurance is to replace our income for at least 10 years. Now, when you're going to buy life insurance, you'll start to hear the terms whole life policy or universal life policy. When we're barely starting to incorporate life insurance into our budget, into our financial plan, the best policy is going to be a term. Those other policies are very expensive, and what they try to do with a life insurance is they try to give you life insurance, and these particular life insurances, they try to give you life insurance, and then they try to match it up with an investment. And so when they combine these two, it becomes very expensive. When you're ready to invest, you can do the same thing and have better results. So life insurance is meant to bridge a gap between where you are and where you're trying to go. And then we talked about an emergency fund. Proverbs 21:20 says, there is desirable treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise. What this tells us is that it is biblical to save. And having an emergency fund can be the difference between having a bad week, having a bad month, or having a bad year. And so the idea of saving for an emergency is starting with $1,000 so that you can use that only for emergencies. And it's helpful if we can put it into an interest earning account. They say 85% of all people don't use interest earning accounts. Now, the difference of saving in just a regular saving or checking account and an interest earning account is you're going to be able to earn at least 4% interest. That's the going rate right now, while you're saving your money. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But what I've seen is credit unions, smaller banks, they normally offer stuff like this so that to incentivize their customers in saving, and while they save, they can make a little bit of money. Now, the idea of an emergency fund is to try to take care of that as soon as possible, because this is your first step in starting to bring stability to your finances. And so, like I said, something we can do immediately, and there's different ways that we can build this up without even touching our income. The other day, me and my wife were talking, and we're like, we've got all this stuff in our garage. We need to have like a garage sale or something. So we can figure out ways to generate income. The other day, somebody called me, somebody that's working on their finances, and said, hey, I found something in my house that I can sell, and it's worth $1,000. I was like, there you go. There's your emergency fund. And so we can be creative on how we can generate money so that we can accomplish this. The benefit of having an emergency fund is that we start to build a foundation where we can start to build up our financial plan. It helps us to not go backwards and borrow money if we have an emergency, and it helps us to build security and stability for our home. I know that our wives, if we're men, will feel comfortable knowing that we have an emergency fund, that we have money there to take care of an emergency. Now, like I said, last week I got a lot of questions. I want to just stop here. This is what we talked about last week before we get into the meat of our Sunday school this morning, and see if anybody has any questions or input. Why is silence so awkward? Okay, no questions. All right, so the real thing that I want to talk about today is the cause of financial instability. In the book, Same as Ever, the author, Morgan Housel, talks about the financial instability hypothesis. And this is written by a professor from the University of Washington named Hyman Minsky. And this is what he says. When the economy is stable, people get optimistic. When people get optimistic, they acquire debt. When unhealthy amounts of debt are acquired, the economy becomes unstable. Therefore, the lack of a recession plants the seeds for the next recession. And what this book is trying to explain to us is that human nature is to relax when times are good. And doing this can lead to bad financial decisions. And so I want to show you a little graph here. And so this is a graph of the U.S. personal savings rate versus the U.S. credit card debt. Okay, can we see that? Okay. So that darker line that is going up and then comes down and then continues to go up, that's credit card debt. The other line, the green line that is kind of stable, then spikes and then comes down, that is the savings rate. And the reason that I wanted to show this to you all is because you see the savings rate just spike at an all-time high during 2020. So we know what that time was. It's the pandemic, right? And so during that time, the economy is very unstable. So what happens when the economy is unstable? People save their money. They're scared. There's panic. That's what we're feeling, right? And when the economy is unstable, people begin to pull back on debt. So we see debt coming off. But then something really interesting happens in the middle of 21, 22. Things begin to get stable again. So then what happens? Debt begins to rise again, and savings begins to drop to an all-time low. Let's see that other one, that other slide that we have. This is the same type of slide, except this was in the end of 2007. So if anybody remembers the Great Recession, what they call it, it's that block of time from 2007 to 2010. And if we can see the graph, it's the same thing. Debt's at an all-time high, and savings are at an all-time low. Thank you for that. So what these graphs show us is that the stability of the economy is what's driving these decisions to save less and get into more debt. And if you can remember the first graph that we saw, that's exactly the position that we are in today. Our economy is at an all-time debt level, and savings are at an all-time low. And so understanding this hypothesis of the financial instability should help us or bring an awareness to us or a motivation to us on how we manage our money. Why do you think that this happens? When the economy becomes stable, these financial decisions are being made. And the reason for that is, I believe, is because we've been conditioned to live with debt. We've been conditioned that debt has to be a part of our everyday life. Dave Ramsey says this: it's hard to imagine a home without a mortgage, a car without a loan, and credit without a card. In other words, this is normal. This is what's being pumped into us. This is what we need. And understanding that we should be prepared during good times will help us to organize our finances and stay in track. I remember when we opened our business. Now, no college degree, so no skills. So as I'm growing to the point where I can open a business now, what do I have to fall back on? Nothing. And so the way that we've operated our businesses over time is we have to make sure small steps. We have to do things that are secure. And this is what motivated us to manage our business in the way that we've always have. Now, Proverbs 13:11 says, money gathered little by little will increase. That means taking these small, sure steps is what's going to help us to bring stability. Right now, there's a lot of talks. You guys may have heard it. There's a 25% tariff that may be added. Well, they said it was going to be added at the beginning of this month. And now they pushed it till Monday. So what happens if they add a 25% tariff on everything that's coming from Mexico? That means that me, as an importer, I'm going to have to take a check to the government in 7 days after our product crosses from Mexico into U.S. I have to add this to our cost of our product. This is going to create a lot of turmoil in our industry. People that don't have the proper cash flow, the savings, aren't going to be able to fulfill this commitment. So what's going to happen? They're going to either go out of business, they're going to lose business, it's going to set them back. And so these things, these challenges have always been in our industry. And those that are able to manage their finances properly are the ones that are able to come out ahead. So how do we protect ourselves from the financial instability? We do that by managing our finances with biblical principles. Genesis 41 is a story of where God is warning of financial instability. This is the story of Pharaoh having the dream of the 7 skinny cows and the 7 fat cows. And they go to Joseph for him to interpret the dream. And Joseph is not only able to interpret the dream, but God is able to give him wisdom on how to handle this problem. Genesis 41, 49. Read both, please. 49 and then 53 and 54.
He said, Joseph gathered very much grain as the sand of the sea, until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. Then the 7 years of plenty which were in the land of Egypt ended, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. The famine was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread.
Us that God tells him how to handle this problem of a financial instability, and at the end, him saving was able to keep him, or keep them, right, Egypt, from going under. And this is why baby step number 2 is paying off debt. And paying off debt means everything except your home. Now, how do we get out of debt? We've heard the terms, well, you use a debt snowball. And so what is the debt snowball? Paying off your smallest debts and then going to the next one. And then as you get to the bigger ones, the idea is you have more money to apply. But I was going to try to explain it intensely, but instead I found a video of Dave Ramsey doing it. So we can show that.
And that's where you list your debt in baby step 2. All of your debt except your home, smallest balance to largest balance. You pay minimum payments on everything but the little one, and you attack the little one with gazelle intensity. You stop doing everything else temporarily, stop all your investments temporarily, pull out any money that is not retirement money, throw it at your debt. We're trying to clear this debt as fast and with gazelle intensity, like the cheetah's trying to kill us, as fast as we can. We're going to do it right now. We attack that smallest debt. When that debt is gone, we squeeze all the money out of the budget we can the next month, and we take that payment and throw it on number 2. When number 1 and number 2 are gone, we take the payments from 1 and 2, and we attack number 3. And we keep going, and we squeeze, and we throw, and squeeze, and we throw. And every time that snowball rolls over, you have bigger payments, because all those payments that were behind you are gone, are now being used to clean up the next one. So by the time you get to the big one, you got a lot of money freed up, and you're just shoveling on that puppy. You're hitting it hard, and you will get out of debt.
So that's what the debt snowball is. So I was going to try to explain that, but I said, there's no way I have that much energy at 10 a.m. in the morning. So I said, I'll let Dave Ramsey do that. And so one of the questions that we get is, do I invest first or do I pay off debt? And so one of the reasons why we focus on paying off debt first is because how we manage our finances is formed through habits. And when we deal with the debt first, then we don't ever have to go back there again. We take care of that, and then we can move forward. Now, a lot of people disagree with the 7 baby steps or the total money makeover, and they say there's better ways to do it. But the reality is it's a proven system. 10 million books sold in the total money makeover. 10 million people have gone through Dave Ramsey's financial Peace University. This is the financial education program. Millions have testified that says, I've done this and I've become better with my money and I'm in a better financial situation. People have even said that it takes them about 10 years to go from paying off debt to becoming a millionaire. So there you go. If you ever wanted to become a millionaire, there's a proven system. 10 to 11 years to go from paying off debt to acquiring up to $1 million by paying off their house, investing, and saving. Now, I want to share with you 3 reasons why it's important for us as Christians to pay off debt. The first thing is I believe that debt is not a part of the equation for the blessing. Deuteronomy 15:6.
For the Lord your God will bless you, just as he promised you. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you.
So here it tells us, I'm going to bless you, but it's not going to be through debt. And I know that when we've lived with debt for so long, we can think that it's a part of our everyday life. There's no way to get rid of this. I remember when my wife and I made a commitment to say, hey, you know what? We're going to deal with this. God was able to help us through making that commitment and moving forward. The second thing is, if we get into debt, or if we have trouble getting out of debt, we will begin to see that debt will begin to control us. Proverbs 22:7.
The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender.
So debt will begin to control our financial decisions. It'll begin to weigh us down. This can affect us not only financially, but mentally and emotionally. This will affect even our relationships. You know, we heard that testimony in the beginning. That couple would not talk about money because they were in debt. So it could affect our marriage, our health, our relationship with God. And then debt will hinder us from growing financially. Why? Because our income is our biggest wealth building tool. What we have left over at the end of the month, after paying all our necessities, paying all our bills, that portion, whether big or small, is what's going to help us to get ahead. If we commit all our money to bills and payments, then we forfeit the opportunity to grow. Now, we're going to be showing you some investment models that shows how a little bit can go a long way. We're going to do that next week. We're going to start talking about investing. But we're going to be able to see how just taking a little bit of our income and investing it will give us a good result. Now, the Bible has a perspective on how to deal with debt. Proverbs 6:4-5. And this gives us the perspective or the mentality, you could say.
Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler.
So you heard Dave Ramsey right now said, with a gazelle intensity. And this is what he's talking about. This is where he gets it from. It's actually biblical. Gazelle, to do things with a gazelle intensity means to do it extremely fast. They say that a gazelle can run up to 50 to 60 miles an hour. And so this is what the Bible is saying, is do it with extreme speed. This should be our attitude of getting loosed from debt, a sense of urgency. Now, this chapter, though, or this scripture also talks about or applying this to code signing. Now, code signing is you getting into debt for someone else and you not getting the car or the house or the washer, whatever it is that other person is buying. A few weeks ago, Angel sent us this little video. It reminded me of one of my Diaz, and I wanted to show it. Go ahead and show that video.
Cosign. Why do you need a cosigner? Because the bank won't approve me on my own. And why won't they approve you on your own? My credit's not so good. It's pretty bad. Do you not see where I'm going with this? No, what do you mean? You have bad credit, which I'm not judging you on because I understand that the economy that we're in puts a lot of people in a tough position. But you stopped paying on your own credit cards and your own loans, and you want me to co-sign, which makes me equally responsible as you. So you weren't able to pay your own things, but I'm supposed to expect you to pay something more that you can't afford on your own? They're not approving you because you cannot afford it on your own and because your history of payment is negative. So why would you put someone in a position to take that risk with you? You could have just said no. I could have just said no, but you know what? Sometimes people who ask for a cosigner need to be like schooled in what it means for someone to cosign. When you ask someone to cosign, you're asking them to take full financial responsibility for whatever it is that you're asking them to cosign on. And it's not fair. And a lot of people do it just because it's an awkward position to be in. They don't want to say no. They don't want to seem like the bad guy. And now they're responsible for something that you cannot afford. Because if the bank is not giving it to you, that means you cannot afford it based on your payment history and your current income. So I'm sorry if you feel judged or if I'm being a little harsh, but don't ask people to cosign for you. If you cannot afford it on your own, do not ask for a cosigner. Lower your expectations or find a way to increase your income, but putting someone in that position is irresponsible. And honestly, it's kind of rude.
So this was a little harsh, right? But we all have a family member that'll tell us how it is, right? So code signing is it's a difficult position to be in, and the Bible talks about running from it. And so the next baby step after we pay off our debt is a fully funded savings account. And this is a 3 to 6 month of expenses. This is your saving for this. And some people ask, well, why 3 months? Why 6 months? Who does this apply to? And we have a little slide here. And so this slide basically explains that 3 months would apply to those that are single with a stable income or a family that has 2 stable incomes. So 3 months of expenses would be sufficient. Now, 6 months of expenses are these more difficult situations or more complicated situations where a family only has 1 income, an irregular income. That means that everything that they bring in is based off of self-employment, commission-based, seasonal work, things like that. And or they have the responsibility of supporting somebody with a chronic illness. So this is the advice on that. But when we're able to do this, when we're able to save 3 to 6 months, we'll accomplish this baby step number 3. Now, we talked about doing it into an interest earning account, right? So at $1,000, that interest earning account maybe not make a big difference, but as you begin to save more and you get into this step, that interest earning account will benefit you. These steps are building up your foundation for consistent financial growth, and it's creating stability for your financial plan. So I want to stop here, see if anybody has any questions or any input before I go on. The last point is preaching. No, I'm just joking. Anybody have anything here? Okay. Joaquin.
Test. All right, I just have a few things to say. I really appreciate the Sunday school. I know we talked last Sunday, and you said you wanted people to comment, so I decided to comment. And so a lot of the things you've been mentioning, I started applying in my life the past couple of months, the debt snowball, the budgeting, and I don't know if maybe there's people here, like they're on the fence about it, but it actually really works great. And so I found myself working, and at the end of the month, I would be like, oh, where did all my money go? And so I started implementing a budget, and it was the same way watching like these Dave Ramsey videos. And at the end of the month, you're able to see how much money you have left over, and you can put it out of debt. And so I had student loan debt, and I also had some credit card debt. And I stepped into all of this not really knowing knowledge about finances, all of that. And so I started equipping myself, a lot of what you're saying. And at the end of last month, I was able to pay that all off and be debt-free. But a lot of it has to do with all these principles that you implement. You put God first, you tithe, you give, and then you start focusing on your debt. And you attack that, like in that video. You attack it with everything. If that means not going to eat out, if that means not buying a new suit, you put all that money at that student loan that I had. And then the same thing regarding what he was saying about getting ready for the 3 and 6 months of your income. And so all of that I started implementing, and it works really, really well. And so if there's anybody in here, maybe you have a lot of debt, or maybe you don't know where to start, all these principles that Mr. Robert's talking about, they work really well, and I would just encourage anybody to start doing that, and you'll see it.
Awesome, thank you, yes. I did not pay him to say that, so. Anybody else, a comment or a question right here in the front?
Earlier you mentioned to put your funds into an interest earning account so you can earn 4% interest. 4% interest. How do I go about that? Do I go to my who do I bank with and let them know, or what would be like the proper words to tell them?
Yeah, so usually the bigger banks like Chase or Bank of America, Wells Fargo, I've never heard that they do these types of accounts. Usually the banks that do it are the smaller banks, regional banks, and credit unions. Those are the banks that will offer that. So you just ask them, do you guys offer an interest earning account? And sometimes they'll say, yes, we do, but this is how we do it. You have to have a checking account, and then we give you that option, to have the interest earning account. The one that we have, you gain interest on the checking account, and you gain interest on the savings account. The savings is more than the checkings, but we had to make some changes so that we could be able to benefit from that. And so you just ask them, do you guys offer that to your customers? One of the banks that I had asked is, I said, okay, up to what amount are you able to earn this interest? And they said, okay, well, once you meet this threshold, we end up paying you less interest. And so I said, so I give you more money, you give me less interest? And they're like, yes. I said, okay, next bank. It didn't make any sense, right? But there's some banks that don't have a limit on it, that you can you get to the mic? That you can put in as much as you can, or as much as you want or you can, and that they'll pay you the interest on it. Go ahead.
Can you mention a couple of banks that will do that?
I can tell you afterwards. I don't want to endorse them over YouTube, and it'd be like, we don't know that guy. Nah, I'll mention it. But if you just call around credit unions, they'll be able to. Credit unions are really good about that stuff. Okay, anybody else? Angel.
What percentage would you say, like if you work and you have a 401k, and of course there's a match, but that only goes to a certain amount, but you can put in more? And so what would you say would be, because I use my 401k almost like a savings, because I put it in there because it's growing faster and it has a better interest rate. And then if you ever borrow from it, you're actually as you're paying it back, you're making 4% interest on your own loan that you do yourself. So what would you say would be a percentage between putting it somewhere else compared to just parking it in your 401k?
So you're saying, is there a difference in interest by doing that with your 401k than by putting it into an interest earning account?
Yeah.
So an interest earning account, that's going to go based on the market, right? Depending on what interest rates are, they lend you so much because currently they're lending at so much. And so it's pretty much, if we're talking 4% is pretty much the same thing right now. But if interest rates rise, those interest earning accounts will also rise also. So you may be able to get a better deal there. But we're going to get into that. I'm glad you brought that question up, because we're going to get into that in next week when we talk about investing and how we work with our retirement funds and different stuff like that. Okay, one more. Anybody else over here? Jamie?
Going back to Dave Ramsey's video, I know he said he had an example of 4 or 5 debts that you snowball. But can you just clarify, because I know he doesn't mention it. He mentions it in the book, but how to go to, in ways of attacking it, does that mean that one would stop all the other credit card payments and then just attack that one, or do you do the minimum and everything else?
Yeah, so he never recommends for us to stop paying all of our other responsibilities. He always says that we pay everything at a minimum, and then any extra money, we first pay the smallest one, so that we can then take that payment and that extra money that we're applying to that smallest debt, and then now we're applying that to the next one with the minimum payment. And so that's how it ends up becoming that snowball. Really good. Okay, one more question over here.
So let's say you have to buy a refrigerator and, something else that you have to. Now, do you put it on a credit card, or do you get a credit card from Lowe's and put it on a credit card instead of just one credit card payment?
Yeah, so the idea of the emergency fund is that to have that, so if something like that happens, you use your emergency fund. But let's say you don't have an emergency fund. Well, at that point, you have to make the best decision that you can because of the situation that you're in, right? And so I know that Lowe's does the 6 months no interest and all kinds of stuff like that. But the idea is to get to the point where we're not having to use those options, that we're able to be our own bank and we're financing our own stuff, Okay? So I want to move on real quick here. Man, the time flies. And so, online question. Can I still give at conference if I'm on the budget? How do I give when I'm trying to save for my emergency fund? So the 7 baby steps are great steps. They're great principles to apply to our finances so that we can get ahead. But I think that one of our biggest advantages of being in our fellowship, in our churches, is that God challenges us to give. And when God is challenging us to give in tight times, it's because He wants to do something in the area of our finances. This is what I call the unfair advantage. God giving us an advantage when we don't deserve it so much that when others look at our lives, they think, man, that's not fair. And so my experience has been when we give, or giving is what unlocks the unfair advantage in our life. And so there's giving out of obedience. And when God is challenging us, prompting us to give, and we obey, God creates an opportunity to bless us and to enlarge our faith. I remember being a newlywed. My son, RJ, he's only a few months old. We go to church. Pastor Andy Anderson is here from Africa, and he's preaching at our church. It's a Wednesday night. And at the end of the service that he preaches, our pastor gets up and says, okay, Pastor Andy didn't ask me to do this, but I want to do this because I want to bless him. He's in the middle of a building project, and he pulls an offering, a pledge, for us to be a part of getting involved in helping him with his building project. Now, we have few $100s in our savings account or bank account, and I feel like, man, God, I need to be a part of this. And we do this. I remember on the ride home, going home, and I'm all excited, like I just obeyed God, you know? And I remember telling my wife, hey, I gave all our money away. And my wife looks at me and she tells me, RJ has no Pampers. And I'm like, oh, shoot, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But I didn't know that he didn't have Pampers. I was just trying to obey. We never talked about him needing Pampers again. So I guess either she found Pampers or she found money, one of the two. But these opportunities are opportunities for God to enlarge our faith and bless us. Now, I'm not saying go give your rent money. I don't believe God wants us to be irresponsible. I believe God wants us to be obedient. In John 6, 1 through 4, this is the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. And it's really interesting if you read this story on your own time, that Jesus asked his disciples, man, where are we going to get bread for all these people? Jesus, the one that can do miracles. And what he was doing is he was trying to test them. And I believe that that's what God does when he asks us to give in very difficult times. And they say they find a kid with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. They say that a barley loaf of bread was the most common type of bread. In other words, it was the base form of provision. And some commentators believe that this was not the kid's lunch, that it was actually the kid that was trying to take food around people to try to sell it. So whether it was his lunch money or it was his money to make money, God asked him to give that so he could do a miracle. Even one of Jesus' disciples says, what are we going to do with this little bit of bread and little bit of fish? In other words, they didn't understand that God could take something so little and create a miracle with it. And sometimes we can look at our offerings or our money and say, you know what? It's nothing. God can't do nothing with this. But when we give out of obedience, God can bless us in a big way. John 6, 12 through 14.
So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain so that nothing is lost. Therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world.
Yeah, so you can see that even his disciples were able to see, you know what? God can do financial miracles. God has the ability to move supernaturally when we give in obedience. When we were building our church building, I was in the time of our business where I desperately needed a warehouse, desperately. My warehouse was falling apart. But then all the building project started and the building fund started, and that was like 3 years of preparing and giving. And I remember having to look at my business and say, you know what, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to be set aside your needs because we're doing this at church. And I remember getting to the part of where we're almost done with this building. It's 2019, and we're finishing up the last things, and I get a call from a realtor. And at this time, I had already moved my offices to McAllen because I wanted to get out of Hidalgo. I don't have nothing against Hidalgo, but it's a little rough. And I said, you know what, I'm running from this place. I'm never coming back here again. I get a call from a realtor, and the realtor tells me, hey, I found a building for you. And I said, oh, yeah, where is it? He says, right next door to where your current building is. I said, oh, no, we have some pictures of what that building looked like. So this is old, rundown, built in 1978. You can go ahead and show those. Nasty, terrible. It would flood and the water would it was muddy everywhere. It was just a mess. And so he tells me the price of what they're asking. I said, bro, if I'm going to buy that building, it's going to have to be cheaper than that. And he says, thanks for that. And he says, well, let me talk to the owner. The owner knows that it needs a new roof and this and that. So they ended up offering it to us, and we ended up putting in an offer super cheap, dirt cheap. I mean, we paid $13 a square foot, which is unheard of. So we took that building, we renovated it. I spoke to one of the guys that we speak to, one of our advisors from Mexico about building and different things. And he told me, you need to make a plan. If you're going to buy this building, you're going to renovate it, you're going to have to pay it off in 5 years. So I said, okay, we did it. And we go ahead and show the next pictures. We ended up renovating it, brand new. We brought it down to the red iron. Everything's new. Electrical, plumbing, refrigeration, everything. And we basically just used the concrete and the steel frame. But that's what we turned it into. But what was really interesting about this story is that this happened immediately. Thank you. This happened immediately after we were done with our church building. In other words, God was saying, hey, you know what? You take care of my house, you obey, and you give, and I'm going to take care of you. So that plan to pay off that building in 5 years actually turned into 2 years. We ended up paying it off in 2 years. Right now, with all the construction and all the development in the industrial space, that building ended up being worth 3 times more than what we paid for it. At the time that we did the renovation, Trump was in office. Trump was giving tax incentives to renovate old buildings. So not only were we able to benefit on the growth of the value, but we were able to depreciate the building. So this is like an unheard of situation, but that's what happens when we give. So there's giving out of obedience, and then there's giving out of a willingness to give. In 1 Kings 3:4, it talks about Solomon having a heart to give. It says, now the king went to Gibeon, sacrificed there, for it was the great high place. And Solomon offered thousands of burnt offerings at that altar. Solomon's heart was to give. He had this willingness to give. And this is the place where God asked him, what can I do for you? And he says, give me wisdom. And God tells him, I'm going to give you wisdom and financial blessing because of your willingness to give. And so one of the major questions that I get from people about business is, how do I tithe off of my business? This is a little tricky because normally it's easy to tithe off of your income, but off of your business, it's very different. And so I'm going to share one more story and then I'm going to finish here. But when we started our business, that's exactly what we did. We paid ourselves an income so that we could tithe. But what happens when your business starts growing? What happens when it starts becoming profitable? What happens when CPAs start telling you, manage your money like this so that you can save in taxes? You're going to have a conviction on how you manage that profit. So a willingness to give is you saying, God, how can I give? How can I bless your church? How can I bless you? I know people that reinvest their profits or expense it, and then they say, hey, I have no taxable income, therefore I don't have to give. There's no way that God can honor our finances like that. When we opened our real estate company, this was only 10 years ago. Our real estate company was opened with just a little of investment. Today, that real estate company owns multiple properties that are paid for, debt-free. They bring in rental income every month. It is a full functioning business that is now competing with our produce business on Renoview, on sales. And this year, I think that our real estate company is going to outgive our produce company. But when I started that company, I remember being at Tucson Conference and taking my checkbook and saying, God, I'm just going to give a little offering. I'm just going to connect my business with you. And now 10 years later, this is what we're seeing. God didn't tell me, hey, if you give, I'm going to do this. It was just a willingness to give. And Proverbs 11:24 says, there's one who scatters, yet increases more. And there is one who withholds more, who withholds more than is right, but leads to poverty. So giving measures our ability to receive and to manage. And so I think I'm out of time for today. And so thank you. Enjoy today's service.